What is up, everyone? My name is Commander, and welcome to an episode of Ark Survival Evolved. Today we are going to talk about top base locations that I have picked and explain their weaknesses and their positives, whether it be resources or just defendability. We're going to go ahead and go over these areas, and I'm going to explain areas that you shouldn't even build or shouldn't even think about building, even though they're not my top picks. So just kind of explain a little bit of everything of what we're actually going to, where you should build and where you shouldn't build. Hopefully it will be helpful, and I can't get off my Giga. Uh-oh. Why can't I get off my Giga? About time. What the heck was going on there? So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and show some optimal base locations. Where my base is actually not my top pick. You might be surprised and think, well, you picked, of course, your own base. No, not at all. After looking around and realizing there's actually a lot of better places than what I picked. But I kind of missed out, and now I'm sucking it up and dealing with it. I'm not moving again. So, I will bring you back when I hit the first base location. Alright, everybody, we're back, and this is the first base location that I would heavily suggest. This is probably not, I don't consider it one of the better positions, and the reason why is literally due to its resources that it is open to. It definitely does have a little more than others, but it's on the lower end of my list, because some of the resources are not as existent on this side of the map as they are on the other side without some extra work. And so this area right here, and also because it is on the beach, and beaches tend to be easily raided. It's flat land, it's wide open, and one of the biggest things I want to point out about beaches, are these his turtles? Oh, I don't have, where's my super spyglass? Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, they're tamed. So one of the biggest things that I have to say about bases is the first thing you want to do is limit the land capacity for your enemy to approach. And when you live on a beach, the enemy has, in some cases, even upward positions, but large stretches of land to get their mounts on and prep them for a battle. So that's my first thing against beach bases. But this particular space is good for for a couple reasons. You can see right now, you already see some metal right there. It has great metal access. It has the same metal access my base has, which I would put on a very good area, and it's actually closer to some more metal. There is a cave somewhere over along this edge. Take me a minute to find it. You actually have to mine it out. This cave has obsidian and metal in it. Now, I have heard it got nerfed a little bit. It doesn't look like it to me. It looks like there might even be more metal than there was before. But Q said that the cave got nerfed a bit. It looks like it's fine to me. There's metal and obsidian here, and it's right in your back door. And one of the things I heavily got to point out is when you are out collecting resources, and this is one reason why a base with the resources that are close to it is, in my opinion, a better location than somewhere far away, and why it sometimes, in some cases, outweighs defensibility. The location here is perfect. It doesn't take long to go out, get the metal, and bring it back. And if you don't want to go out every day to go get it, you don't have to. You can just go out when you want to go gather it and then be done with it. If you don't want to gather metal that day, don't worry about it. But honestly, you're not as disinclined to gather that metal because it's so close. Just like the metal in your base, well, it's staring you in the face. You got to get rid of it, so you go jump on your ank and you break the metal. And it's the same thing everywhere around this area. Generally, this area is a very good spot to get metal. There's also more metal this direction, up there, and then also up here, I make a loop from the top of my mountain up there, which I don't have metal on my mountain anymore because I've used it up, but there is metal up there. And I come down, hit some metal on the ridge, come down here, hit more metal, and then swoop around and hit some more metal, come to the cliff, and by the time I make this little loop up to my base, I pick up 2,000 metal without ever going into that canyon. And so that right there is a good access of metal. As far as crystal, there is not much crystal, actually. So this is another con to living here. on this side of the map, there isn't much crystal. And so you can see some of that metal there now. Trying to set up here gives, there's not a lot, I mean, it gives some constraints, although you don't need a lot of crystal, so crystal's not necessarily that big of a deal. But, so you have great silica pearl access. You have silica pearls right outside. Granted, there's not many in the general area, but you can also go up towards the bridge, which it doesn't take long on a water mount. And you've got this whole ocean, which I have yet to really explore 100%. I do have a little trouble finding silica pearls, but I have found a good enough number to at least start getting some auto turrets cranked out for myself. But yeah, that's the base right there. It's got decent metal spawns. Cementing paste can be gathered if you want. Better to have something self-sufficient that reproduces rather than taming acatinas, which, if you're like me, you don't want to make the cakes. And as far as silica pearls, not too bad. And obsidian's not bad. Just crystal's your biggest problem, and the defensibility of the terrain. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next location, and I will bring you back. We're going to go ahead and hit my base next, because I wasn't even going to put it at the bottom of the list, but it does really deserve to be at the bottom of the list. Resource-wise, same kind of concept. Metal is a little further away from me, but what I get in exchange is a defensive trait. He gets, gets also a good amount of eggs that spawn. Up here, that's another downfall of this base. I gain more defense, but I lose more resources. Up here on top of this mountain, you don't get eggs. Eggs do not spawn worth nothing up here. Although my Giga seems to love laying eggs up here. So it's really weird that the Giga lays eggs, but nobody else will lay eggs. And I have an egg and poop collector collecting eggs. You couldn't imagine the number of eggs you would have if I didn't have that collector. I would have almost nothing. But yeah, so defensively, because the resources are generally about the same here. You have one walkway up this entire yard, and you are the tallest thing. Now, on that note, there is some area right here where someone could set up, but that's a far range. I mean, that's a far cry for maybe cannons to fire. Generally, you're going to be attacked by flyers because you're so high up off the ground, which means you're not going to see too much action, actually. Because flyers coming up to attack a base full of turrets, that's not a very smart idea. It can happen, and you will see it happen, but it's better that you be attacked by flyers and let your turrets let loose into flyers than it is ground mounts that can really just screw up your day. But the land is generally flat. That's one of the positives of this area. All this is almost about the same height all the way across. You could build the same foundation for most of it, as long as you don't fall off the edge here where you have to put that. You'll notice I don't have any walls. The reason why I don't have any walls was exactly for the reason of the catapults and stuff. If there are going to be catapults or ballistas or something deployed, I want to be able to fire back from the other side. And I figured at this point, it's going to be hard to even render from this distance. We're going to go ahead. Let's get out of game mode. If you are right here, you're barely able to see my base. So really, you're not going to be able to do much damage from here, and everywhere else, you're not going to be able to render the base. So that is a defensive trait of its own, not being able to render the base and not being able to launch attacks on it. It is a metal structure, so it is going to be a little harder to break, even if you did want to lob. You can't lob catapult rounds, which is cheap. So you have to fire cannon rounds or rockets, which rockets wouldn't even make it that far. So the other defensibility about this is this very long, narrow path that leads all the way up. You can see I put some behemoth gates down there, and I need to establish a lot more for defense. This will keep the ground mounts from walking up, and these spots that sit up here like this can be used to set up turret bases that keep the enemy at bay while they try and break through turrets, break through walls. The turrets will go ahead and beat them until they give up and go cry and run home to mommy. So defensively, this has a very strong defense. It is a little wider open than some of the others, though, and traversing the land up isn't so bad as much as the defensibility of yourself by building. Land-wise, it's not very defendable other than the fact that it's high. that gives it its best advantage over every other place. Alright guys, we're coming up on the bridge here, and this is particularly my next location. I'm a real big fan of it because of the really good access of resources and the very good defendability, and also I did a previous video called Super Secret Base, and if you want, watch that video and it will show you how to do this. This, I mean, in my opinion, this is the optimal base location. This is number one because of what it is and where it is. It does have no yard though, so there's a few downfalls there. So really, it's not much of a base. You can see there is a single dino in there. That is my Tapajara. This is my bug out base, basically. If my main base is destroyed, I will always be able to live here. It won't take much to defend it, and that's essentially what I'm trying to establish here. It's something that's very easy to defend and out of the way that I can always fall back to for safety. Right now, I don't have much resources put in it, and there's not even any storage in it. But it'll work if, in the case you need to bug out and hide. So here's the next location right here. The bridge. It is a two-way street only, which means the enemy has to come from that way or that way. You can line the gates. You can line the bridge with doors to keep people out. Put a bunch of behemoth gates down to block people. Then on top of that, hang if you have a little extra room on the sides, set up some foundations and hang some ceilings off the side and mount turrets to them. What that will do is make it to where you can fire at the enemy while they're attacking your doors. That's going to slow the enemy down. They pretty much won't want to beat through the doors, because every time they break open a door, more turrets open fire. It'll also slow their advance because they're going to constantly be draining turrets at a certain rate. Now, they could fly up with flyers again, but again, turrets and flyers don't mix very well, especially if headshots are made. In general, you always have these wings right here. You can put miniguns, or you could just establish a base up here. I suggest a very vertical base in this case, just for the fact that you're going to be dealing with a very narrow area, and I really suggest some strong defense that cannot be knocked off, because you can set some auto turrets on this and they will not get destroyed, versus maybe they snuck up and played some C4 and dropped your turrets, which is a possibility. And so if you place some turrets right here that can watch your turrets up here, they're not going to be able to do that. Also, you can put that little bug out base down there anyway, so they may have no idea that you're there. You do have these pedestals up here. You can definitely place turrets up here. This will be helpful. You can put all kinds of stuff to defend with, and they won't be able to blow the foundations out, which means they have to come up here, and the only way up here again is with a bird. So these turrets can protect and overwatch your entire base from the front and the back here and keep people out. So that's another area, and it's got plenty of room for turrets. Resource wise, it has excellent access to metal. We start, as we get to this location, you have silica pearls right under the bridge, so you're gonna find a good amount of silica pearls. The most distant resource that you're going to find is cementing paste, but again, you could find it. I think Acatinas actually spawned down in there, so you could tame Acatinas. But let's say you didn't want to tame Acatinas, you could go ahead and go towards that direction where there are some beaver dams. We'll see those beaver dams when I get to the top couple bases, because those areas are almost in optimal locations to gather resources and defensibility wise at the same time. So you could go ahead and gather resources from over there. You have tons of resources, but you can go ahead and gather the metal. All you want right here: silica pearls. Crystal's not far. It's over in the volcano area. There's a crystal cave somewhere around here. I don't know where it's at, but you could always hit the crystal cave. Right inside that middle spire right there, if you go down with an ank, there's about 250 crystal in that spire every time, so you can just drop the ank and go in there and grab it. That's at least what I get, and we are on a ×2 collection, so that's it's a little more than normal, but more than what you'd find. I mean, it's worth it. So, I mean, that's generally the defensibility of this base. You also have these little land areas. You can build some land forts up there, some little forts that overwatch the area if you want to. I just suggest controlling the base. Now, the one big downfall, and the reason why this area in particular doesn't get my top rating, because this would be my ultimate place, is the location. I was warned away from building here because people would, and it wasn't actually by people threatening me, it was actually by other people suggesting, hey, you shouldn't build here, because you are really close to the resources, and this bridge occasionally gets utilized. So if you are on the bridge, you're either going to have to be here to let people through the gates and turn off your turret so they can go back and forth, or you're going to have to defend it because they're going to want to break through eventually. If they want to go through this, they're going to want to go through, and they may destroy your base just for those reasons. The bug out base might be fine because they may never notice, but as far as the gates here and stuff, it will aggravate people for the fact it is here, and that's probably the biggest downfall here. Terrain-wise, not hard to traverse, and I mean they could lob attacks in here, but your narrow passage, this is one of those Spartan moments where the numbers don't matter, because it's all about time, and you're going to watch them waste their troops one at a time. In a narrow passage, which really helps confine it for you to help you defend it. So that's really my particular point here. Alright guys, the next area is right up here in the winter biome. It is a giant ice sheet. This area is very well protected by, actually not even by your own defenses, but by the wild mounts, the wild animals that are here. You have a lot of woolly mammoths and rhinos. Generally, they're not going to be much of a problem because they are generally passive. But you do have a lot of wolves, and you also have a lot of Tyrannuses. Both of these are going to disorganize the military. Anything smaller than a Rex is going to have trouble with the Tyrannus roar. It's going to scare a lot of your mounts, which is going to really disorganize that military force. As they attack, they're going to want to conglomerate on the player, as we've seen many, many times, and that's going to lock up the player when you're fighting with something and all your mounts suddenly rush to attack whatever it is, unless you leave them all on passive. And if you leave them all on passive, that means they can't defend themselves against an attack. But aside from that, the area is extremely cold. I've seen this area get down to negative 76, and it kills people very quickly. I was just in there actually just a few minutes ago trying to do some recording, and I had a lot of trouble getting the. I had a lot of trouble. I was starting to die in there, so I ended up pulling out. So now I'm kind of hovering around it. But this ice sheet that sits here, there's no water underneath it, so don't expect any source of water. Water is probably the biggest drawback of a resource, but I don't have it at my base up there. I use rainfall, and that so far has done pretty well. So just extra water tanks to be able to take care of you. But in the meantime, this is a very flat zone. It protects you very well through its environment, and it gives you a lot of area to build on top of. You can build a lot of defense on your own. This is resource heavy on you, but it works very well. Now there are 3 areas to attack from. You have this route, that route, and probably the best route is this route, your traversability wise, but they're going to have to go through the snow for the most widest and best traversed area. This area is honestly one of the areas I'd heavily suggest. It does have a couple of hillsides, but provided you don't put a wall right at the edge of the ice, you should be fine and not have to worry about mounts jumping in. So keep a small area. If you do want to expand eventually, just have extra walls or something to keep people out. Pin their dinos in, make sure they can't utilize their dinos like they want to by jumping them off or jumping random wild dinos into your yard and killing your mounts. Which is essentially why we build bases like we do, otherwise we wouldn't even care about how big they were. Generally this base area is its frozen area. Resource accessibility wise, it loses the cementing pace access to a degree. I mean, you're not really losing it because you live near the Beaver Dams out in that direction, and you also live near the swamp. It is a little further to the swamp. We're slowly getting closer, and you can tell we're getting closer to the Beaver Dams. The Beaver Dams, in my opinion, are a better location to get resources. This particular base heavily leans towards resources versus other areas. And the reason why is, first off, we're going to hit terrain. You've got a very wide open space, but unless you take up this entire space, you are going to allow for forward operating bases to be established with mounts I have to stress this: the mounts that can do this are going to be Rexes and things of that nature. So that is going to be a difference versus some of the other areas. It won't have Rexes. They're going to be smaller than Rexes because you won't be. Well, no, you can do Rexes because you can get them on the back of a platform saddle. So at best, they're going to get Rexes. Brontos and Gigas won't really be able to get up here. So for an offensive, they're not going to be too well used. But you may not really care. You may have enough Rexes to soak the bullets or whatever you're doing, depending on the size of the base. So I do got to point out, if you're a small base, this is not a good spot for you to live. If you're getting a large base established, this is a great spot to live because you can block this area off. But you do also have to remember you had to take up all this area to block them from establishing an FOB. Terrain-wise, there's only one way up this, and that's past this land bridge. And the terrain that actually you have to traverse for a Bronto or Giga, which means you're going to have a lot of trouble, is very narrow. You're going to see over here. You're going to start seeing there's a lot of rocks here. And almost the only way, and it is the only way, is right up this narrow passage. That's a heck of a trip to take a bunch of Gigas or a bunch of Rexes or whatever you're taking up by land base. So pretty much you're going to have to Quetzal everything in over there or up here and then walk it across. But that's, again, that's a lot to traverse, and that is something I warn against. A lot of traversing is, it's hard to move an army across the map, especially when the map is very narrow, and the dino pathing at this moment is absolutely horrible. When Arch finally gets the dino pathing to where they learn to track and follow lines and stuff, the whole area will be getting up narrow passages won't be nearly as bad. It's a shame that they don't do it already. The biggest the biggest downfall of the area, though, is, aside from that, I mean, because generally it's its size. But if for any other reason you wanted to get Brontos and Gigas up here in mass quantities, there's only one way I could see that happening, and that is, thankfully to the land itself, would be to build a ramp using this land to help you get that ramp up here. And I feel that is one of the best ways to get up here. You could build a wide enough one to get Gigas, Brontos, and Titans up here by walking them up this hill. Now, you could probably just say, well, I'll just march the Titan that way, but then you could block the bridge right here. You have a choke point there. So it forces the enemy to build a ramp to get up here if they don't want to go through that route. And that's an important factor, because if you can block that way and you can hold it, then they have to take the time to build a ramp. And if they're building a ramp and you catch them, you can destroy the ramp. You know what the ramp is for if they're building it. So you can destroy it, you know what's already coming. And basically they won't be able to attack with anything bigger than a Rex, or on the back of a Quetzal, or a Dragon. So generally this area is good in those features. As far as resource-wise, the best thing about the resources here is, even on this right here, you see a bit of metal, but this area has very good access to metal everywhere. And I say that because you have the canyon not too far away. You have cementing paste right here. The Beaver Dams are right here, which also means you have access to rare flowers and rare mushrooms to make refertilizer if you need refertilizer to start spawning in tree cover or whatever. It's more important if you're using S+. You have access to metal over here. If you're a one-man tribe, these little separate nodes aren't very useful to you. But you also have access to this very convenient, where is it at? Right up here. Resource metal nodes. Resource-rich metal nodes, right here. I think they're not resource-rich. I think they're single hits with a good ank. But there's, what I last counted was 28 metal nodes just on the bottom, not including what's in the walls higher up. So you could establish a good amount of metal just from here. If you run out of metal here, just go to the canyon. You got more. If you have other members in your tribe to help you gather metal, there's a lot of metal along the walkway, along just the edge over here. You could just go around the edge and knock it all out. Go into that cave, hit them. There's also metal nodes down on the edge of this area, which, just in general, the area itself is, for lack of a better term, it's very resource rich when it comes to metal and just resources in general. Pearls, maybe your biggest downfall here. I don't know of any real strong areas of pearls over here. You don't have access to a water base, but you can always establish another water base. It doesn't have to be big. And well, actually, you have pearl access from the Beaver Dams. So generally, what you're looking at is pearl access, cementing paste access, metal access. You're close to the volcanic area for crystal. You're close for sulfur. I mean, this area, Viking Bay generally has it all. And I think the Pearl Cave actually is right here in Viking Bay. So you're looking at Viking Bay, pearl access. So overall, your ultimate location is right over in this area. Anywhere in Viking Bay generally gives you a very good access. So this is an area to fight over if you can. The person who lives here will be the strongest. I put it in my number 2 slot because of one thing. It shares every one of the positives on resources, but it has a lot of terrain minuses and one positive. The terrain positive is, look how tall this grass is. If you step out into this grass, it gets very tall, especially if you look this way. You could place auto turrets in this grass and be walking along, the next thing you know, you're dead. You wouldn't see the turrets, and that includes on small mounts. Yes, if you see a base here, you expect turrets, but you can't see them all. Some of these turrets could be out in the middle of nowhere. You might see them as you fly over, but once you're on the ground, you get lost in the grass, and it's very hard to see where everything is at. And I need to go. I want to see what that Quetzal is. Where is my super spyglass? 6. That's a pretty Quetzal. Quetzal. Oh, 100. Wow. But generally, this area, it shares the resources, and its one positive terrain is the grass. Defensibility-wise, there is multiple ways to get up here. This is a hard, not really even a hard one. You can come up through the beach, come right up here, and it's not too narrow, so people can walk right up here and set up. There's a lot of open space to attack from. There's also a way to come in just up this side of the hill. You can march up that side of the hill. The ground is a little harder to traverse over there, if I'm correct. And then you also have up here, you can anybody attacking from that direction. They can come down from over here. They can come down from over here. There is that narrow passage which you can block up if you wanted to, and you could try and block up all these locations, but in general, coming down here isn't too hard. And so your defensibility wise, to keep people from coming in from multiple directions, it's going to almost be impossible. People did suggest to live up on the edges up here, but then you don't have much of a yard. I put this in my top slot just because of the grass. Maybe it's just a personal thing, but it's my number 2. And this is probably the most defendable location. It utilizes what my base already has utilized and adds in the resource supply. You're looking at the same setup. You can see they've already got a massive structure built. This is the top base location. Beaver Dams right here. Metal, they have the same access to the metal over here in Viking Bay, the Viking Bay area. They're right over there. They have the access to the sulfur, the silica pearls from the Beaver Dams, wood access if they want to burn charcoal, to make a bunch of charcoal, which you're going to need a lot of bullets anyway, so you're going to need it. They have access to the Pearl Cave. Is not far away. They don't have access. They're not able to build a water base, but that's not important. They don't need a water base because, well, I mean, they can establish one over there or somewhere else, and they're probably the most resource-funded group anyway by being in this location, so they almost won't even notice it anyway. So on the note of that, I wouldn't even worry too much if you live here because you have such good access to metal. They have great access to crystal here. You can see some of these walls are discolored. Those are actually crystal walls. That's how much crystal they used. They're glass from the S Plus structures, which actually take a good amount of crystal to put these up, and they were able to do every other wall with glass that's as strong as metal, so they can see through and all that. But generally, those crystal walls there, they are the glass walls. They're expensive, and those are 120 health walls, so they're very expensive, and they managed to build a lot here. The narrow path that they have got going on, it's almost impossible to get up here. You have one little narrow walkway up there, which means you had to traverse all this land and get around. And it's tucked away very well from most raids. They can also come up this way, and I think the land is generally smooth up that way. But once you get to right here where their gates are, which it looks almost like a taming pin, it may be a defensive area, but I don't think so, because if it was defensive, they'd probably have it metal. You hit that area, that's a blockade right there. And defenses can engage you right there. You can stop your enemy right there before they even get into the base. But further pressing in means you have to walk up that narrow path, which, like you can see, they've already placed a defensive set of plant X. I would put a metal base with turrets, but that you can do plant X as well. You try and walk up the edge of that with a bunch of dinos. It's not going to happen, which means you're going to limit your amount of dinos until the pathing is better to a few dinos. So to get in, they've got to walk up that. You can't even build ramps very well in here. You could try and get a ramp up here somewhere, or find somewhere you can lay a good ramp down, but it's highly unlikely you're going to get that ramp laid out, and that means you're going to have to walk up probably the main to their main gate, which is going to be the most heavily fortified thing, because that's the only way up. That's really it. I gotta hand it to that area. It's a defensively strong zone in a very resource-rich area. It is the best area. I can't stress that enough. If no one is taking it, you need to Alright guys, this is going to be probably it. You'll notice I didn't cover the redwood, the volcano, or most of the winter biome, or the Scotland area. And that is because the redwood, in my opinion, it's still got the wall up, and so a lot of the defense in that area is not very good. We don't know exactly how resource-rich that area is going to be, because that could be completely wrong by the time that wall comes down. And there may be a lot of resource access in that area that we just don't see right now. Get some water. The scorched area, it does have a close proximity to a lot of things, but the ground itself is very hard to build on, which is going to be a problem. There's not much flat area, and that itself is, in my opinion, a drawback of the area, why I would not build there. You're also looking at the winter biome. Not a lot of the land is very flat, and you're going to freeze to death on it. The ice area was a bit of an exception. There's one also over in the edge of Viking Bay. It just didn't make my top. And it's actually got actual water versus the ice one. And it just hangs off the side. It's actually a very defendable spot. But again, it just didn't make my top because it kind of a redundant area to every other area too as well. And traversing to get up there would be one pain. The final area, the Scotland area, I didn't cover Scotland because Scotland's essentially not a very resource-rich area. About the only real good thing it has is gigas and mutton. It may have a little bit of meat here and there, or not meat, metal and stuff like that, but I've never seen a good source of equipment anywhere, and that's where I want to kind of leave it. If those areas do get upped at all, at some point I will cover them, but as of the moment, there's not much worthy of those areas to label them as good base locations. So I'm going to leave it at that. You guys have a great day.